welcome back to the Modern Housewife podcast. So last week I did an episode with my husband Doug about marriage, our biggest marriage mistakes. And we actually ended up talking a lot about biblical roles for our family and how we're really making it a point, especially this year, to kind of go that direction and pursue Christianity a lot more. We're going to church as a family now, and it's something that has been on my heart to just share openly about because it's truly been so all-consuming to me. I get emotional. Honestly, I can't with it. This podcast kills me. This idea and this concept of submitting to your husband, which is so controversial. It is so triggering. The word submission, the world has twisted it. I wasn't even sure what it meant. It seems kind of weird. Nowadays, people use it as a sexual reference, So I never knew really. I disregarded the word. And so because of that, I shied away from really understanding what those passages meant. It is totally transformed our marriage, you guys. It brings me to tears. I'm going to try and get it together. But it has, again, my husband is not, spiritual is not the word. I don't know. I can't speak on his behalf. You guys heard him last week in that episode about our marriage mistakes and his journey with Christianity truly is just beginning. He's 32 years old. And so anyways, even though he's not gung-ho reading his Bible, he reads it to the kids. We all go to church. He doesn't take us, but we all go to church and he's interested. He's having coffee with the pastor. He's just beginning his journey and I believe his walk with God for life. But it's not something that, it's not been a part of his life like it has for me. The point here is it's totally changed our marriage. It's changed our life. It's changed our business. And I wanted to talk about it. Okay. So longest intro of life, but yeah, today we're going to do a podcast. I'm going to talk with you guys about 5 ways I wasn't submitting to my husband. There's 500,000 truly. Before we get into it though, I just want to thank you guys so much for your support on the last podcast and all the other podcasts. If you like these podcasts, because it's something that, I obviously like doing them myself because I'm sitting here talking to what I feel like is myself, but I know people are watching. Please leave a review on Apple Podcasts. I will link that down below. It would mean the absolute world to me. I actually read them. I honestly wasn't intending for this podcast to turn into some biblical preacher, type of situation, because I just wasn't. But now that we're going that way, I'm going to read a Bible verse to you guys, which a lot of you guys that follow me on this podcast, I could imagine, I have no clue, but I could imagine that a lot of you guys are not religious because I never talked about Christianity really. I said I was a Christian openly, but I wasn't living the way a Christian wife should be living, in my opinion of myself. I wasn't talking about God's role in my life at all publicly on social media, lightly, very lightly. And so because of that, it's not bad or, good. It's just the facts. I attracted a lot of people, a lot of moms that I could imagine are, not interested. So I still think you should listen to my journey. I know I sound preachy too now, but I still think you should listen because, again, like I said, it's transformed our marriage. So if you're struggling in your marriage or if it could be better, which I think is everybody, then I just urge you to listen to my Bible verse, okay? Because this is the time where you're going to click away because you're I don't want to hear thou, thus Bible verses. I'm not interested. But I think if you hear the full explanation for it, it might help you. It's not going to might help you. It's going to help you. Okay. So in 1 Peter 3, never thought I'd read a Bible verse on a camera, but that's sad, but okay. Verses 1-6, God says, "Wives, be submissive to your own husbands so that even if," now this is the verse that stuck out to me, this part, "so that even if any of them are disobedient to the word, that they may that they may be won without a word by the behavior of their wives as they observe your chaste and respectful behavior." And it talks about, your adornment might not be merely external, braiding of the hair, wearing of gold jewelry, putting on dresses, literally everything I have going on right now. It's hilarious. But let it be the hidden person of the heart with the imperishable quality of a gentle and quiet spirit. I think if anyone thinks of Haley, it's not a gentle and quiet spirit. Which is precious in the sight of God. For in this way, in former times, the holy women also who hoped at God used to adorn themselves, being submissive to their own husbands, just as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord. Okay, so let me go back to my notes because I have them for this one. This is a whole thing, okay? So like I said, learned a lot about biblical submission. Actually, the first time that I really dived into it was, of course, from social media. It's not from actually opening my Bible, but at the beginning of 2022, the end of 2021, I stumbled upon this very polarizing account. You either love her or you just detest this woman. You guys can look her up on Instagram. I love her, okay? But I'm also not highly offended. And I take little bits and pieces from everybody. Like, I feel like I can learn from everybody unless someone's absolutely like off their rocker. But most of the time, if I would like really disagree with someone politically, I might still follow them on social media to learn about their financial tips, for instance. Like, I'm not super picky. So anyways, this woman on Instagram is the transformed wife, and she's in her 60s. Her story is she didn't submit to her husband, which I'll explain what that actually means, what I believe it means. You guys can do your own research through the Word of God, obviously. But she didn't submit to her husband for the first, 20 years of her marriage. She was really like contentious. She liked to, quarrel with her husband. So she says she was very self-centered, and a lot of the things that I was and still battle, and I think most wives battle. And so because of that, her marriage was on the rocks for a while, and she was unhappy. Her spouse was unhappy, and all the kids were unhappy, and all this, till she learned about biblical submission, and she talks about it a lot. She's not a woman preacher, but she's an older woman teaching younger wives what not to do based off of her mistakes. And so I really like her because she tells it like it is. A lot of things she is curt about. I wish she was softer, but again, that's just my own opinion about certain things that, certain personality traits. I still really like her. And weirdly enough, she lives by me. Not that I know her personally. Okay. So anyways, the transformed wife. So basically, we're going to talk about how biblical submission, like I said, transformed our marriage, what it is according to the Bible, how this works if my husband is an unbeliever. And he's on the fence. I mean, I think he believes in something, but he doesn't understand. He's going to have coffee with our pastor soon. Maybe I'll update you guys with that. But he doesn't understand, God saving, like why is that necessary? All that, God dying on the cross, Jesus dying on the cross, all that. And also a couple ways I didn't submit to my husband fully. Okay, so biblical submission. The world has such a twisted view on submission. People think that it's abuse. People think that if you are being abused by your spouse, like being hit or whatever, anything under the sun, that it's Christian to just accept it, which is just not the case, Hey guys, I interrupt today's podcast to let you know that we have created a brand new free in-depth guide for basically how you can go from 0 to 6 figures within your first calendar year with creating a personal brand, particularly through the vehicle of selling an online course. So we talk about how to choose a course, the mindset behind being a 7-figure course creator, everything that we've made as far as like mistakes, what not to do, what to do, and basically where to go from here and what to do if you are starting nearly from scratch. So this is particularly for people out there that really want to move at a rapid pace. You guys know if you listen to any of our podcasts that my husband Doug and I are pretty savage because we have to be. We are full-time entrepreneurs and there's no way to be lax about it. So this is just the way that we coach, and this is the way that this guide is put together and the series of videos for you guys. So I hope you guys get immense value from this free training. I will leave the link down below. Again, it's completely free. I hope you guys take it and let me know what you think. So let's go ahead and get back into the podcast. It's not slavery. It's not like just being a slave to your spouse and doing every single thing for them. And it doesn't mean that men aren't supposed to listen to their wives. Like a lot of people like to twist this simple there's like a couple passages on it and they like to just absolutely twist it. It doesn't mean that, it's not a partnership, like marriage is not a partnership. It's none of those things. So the first thing I want to talk about is why I specifically chose to submit to my husband. Submitting from my perspective means so many things. And the reason why you do it, actually, let me back up, is for a lot of different reasons. First off, it's God's design. Okay. So a marriage does not work with 2 atoms. And I know a lot of you guys who might not be religious listening to me, which I think might be the majority. I don't know. You might think, okay, like female empowerment, I'm a feminist, or I believe that women and men are equal. It's nothing to do with women and men are equal. Like they are equal. What it means is that your husband has the final say and that you should submit to that authority, even if sometimes you feel like it's not the right thing or it's not. Now God says, obviously don't do something that is absolutely sinful, so that certain things like you literally can't submit to because it will risk your own life. I'm not talking about abuse and things like that, but generally for most things that your husband has the final say. Anyways, the biggest reason why you do this, and God's ways, it is the opposite of the world's way. Okay. So like when you hear someone say this and you've never even been introduced to the topic of submitting to your husband, I want to say spouse, because I'm so used to saying spouse, but husband, you might think this is like wackadoo stuff. Like there's no way. I want to tell my husband what I think. I want him to be open to what I'm saying. And you can do all of those things like biblically. You can openly go to your husband as long as you're not quarreling with him and like, have a pissed off attitude, which trust me, this is all me. Okay. Or if you're not degrading him or disrespecting him with your tone and what you're saying, you can present, another side of the argument or whatever, something that you disagree with to your husband. That's not what the Bible's saying. You can openly go to your husband, but at the end of the day, submitting to his decision on good-natured topics, even if it's something that you disagree with. So the reason why you do this is because submission is a picture of Christ and the church. And from my understanding, submission and submitting to your husband is the biggest act of love and respect that you can give a masculine man. Okay. But according to God, basically, does the bride of Christ order him around and tell him what to do? Does she wear the pants? Is he not the head of the church? God planned for the marriage relationship to picture this truth to the world. So the question that I had to ask myself is my marriage a clear picture or is it distorted? The other thing I think I was getting wrong for so many years and like just totally dismissing these verses in the Bible is because I didn't realize that you are not the God of your husband. Now, I think a lot of people that might not subscribe to this ideology, biblical ideology, they might think, well, we are equal and we are partners. And ultimately, if I say, no, this is not the way that I want to school our kids, and he says, yes, like I'm going to go with my way because I'm equal. So obviously, if you think that, this is not submitting to your husband. But at the same time, if you are Christian, if you're practicing Christianity, if you believe in God, you will ultimately believe that God will deal with your husband, not in a negative, weird way, but like God will handle your husband, and he has the power to, this is what is so powerful. I know I said that twice, but I did not realize that I didn't have to step in and disagree with my husband every time there was an opportunity, every time I felt like, and I'm very opinionated. My whole entire family is, my sister is, we're such loudmouths. Like I said in the last podcast, or many of them, we're half Portuguese. I really think that has something to do with it. My dad is like that. And so we are like the first people to like put our opinion in there, which is ridiculous. I'm trying to suppress that urge because it's annoying. I understand. But I always thought that, well, I have the right to say something. I'm his wife and like he should listen to me. And I think that is still the case. But the thing that I didn't realize that comes with submitting to your husband is the fact that, like I said, God has the power to change your husband's heart. Okay. And so it's going to result, in my experience and like hearing of other people's experiences, it's going to result in a fragmented and dissatisfied marriage if, you end up trying to become the God of your husband. So let me give you guys an example, okay? Let's say, and this is like such a good example, okay? Because everyone, I feel like, goes through this. Men are just creatures of habit. They're all doing this. So let's say your husband's at work all day long. He was reamed by his boss, okay? Or I don't know, he got in trouble at work or he didn't do something right, or maybe he's just tired, like fatigued physically, mentally, all the things. You cook chicken parm. I only say that because I'm cooking this right now, but you cook like the best meal ever, his favorite meal, okay, or your favorite meal, whatever, chicken parmesan. And you've cooked it all day in the crock pot. You put flowers on the table, there's candles lit, and you're like so excited because you had a good day. But your husband, like I said, was reamed at work. So he comes home from work. You expect him. So this is already a problem I was having, I think most wives, your expectations of how someone else should be acting. And then when those expectations are not met, you're let down, but it's like your own expectations. It's your own fault, right? You should have none. So your husband walks in the door and you're like, these kids are dying to play with their dad, and I want a break. I've been climbing like a tree all day, like I always say. And your spouse wants nothing to do with it. He's nice, like, hey, honey, gives you a half side hug. It's like, oh, thanks for the meal. He sits down, he eats it, and then he goes to sit on his phone on the couch. So this happens a lot, and so I'm not going to lie. If this happened to me, which Doug doesn't do a lot of this because we work together, but there's other things, that peeve me about my spouse. Like, just like there's things that clearly he's annoyed with about me because it's just, we're married. We're together literally all the time, except for right now as I'm filming the podcast because of the nature of our business and homeschooling. So, we get on each other's nerves. So for good reason. So this could be a great opportunity for me to act as a God to my husband. So I would go over to my husband right away. Not that this literally happened, but some variation of this for sure has happened because he didn't meet my expectations for his mood or how I feel like he should be treating me or the kids or me in front of the kids, whatever. So I'd go over to him, hypothetically, and I'd say, you're acting so wrong. Like, you really need to check yourself because we have slaved over this meal all day. I watch the kids, and obviously I'm in a quote unquote rightful place. Like, logically, I did all these things. I maybe put on a nice dress for him. I put on, I don't know, like lip gloss and perfume for him. I cleaned the house for him. I ironed his shirts for him. I did all these things, and now I'm going to ream him because he deserves it. So this right here is unbiblical. And this is the kind of stuff that I did. Now, this sounds like an extreme. It's not that extreme, actually. It's pretty normal. But this is the kind of stuff that these are the ways that I lashed out, because when he wasn't meeting my standard for something, it was like an opportunity for me to correct him. When instead, submitting to your husband, I think, go to the word, because I'm not a preacher. Okay. I'm just sharing my own experience. But I think that you just let it go. And I know a lot of women would be like, that is wrong. You're enabling him, blah, blah, blah. But if you have faith in God, you can gently go to your husband at a different time, obviously, and say, hey, is there any way that you can, change what you're doing after work? We're so excited to see you. I spend a lot of time doing all these things. And you tell him once. You don't need to berate him like 100,000 times because you are on your high horse and you're acting like his God. And so that's just like one small example of like a lot of the mindset that comes against submission. Women feel like it is their duty and their right to correct their husband, 24/7 like I did. And so what I would do now in that circumstance, not that that's happening right now, but I would probably love my husband more. So this is like totally opposite to who I was, okay? I feel like I'm transforming, like I'm becoming a transformed wife. Not that I follow that account super closely, but now if this does happen, Doug is like freaking, he'll go for 4 hours taking calls all day with our students or with different clients and sometimes sales calls. And it is so exhausting and fatiguing. I also understand because I'm watching him do it. It's hard when you don't see him being berated at work, right? And you're like, what's wrong with you? I had a bad day too, but since we're in it together, it's easy for me to say. But so let's say he'll come out of 4 hours of Zoom calls. He's mentally depleted, and he snaps at me or the kids. I will no longer feel the need to berate him on why that's wrong, even if what he's doing is horrible, even if he yells at, yells at one of our kids and says, you need to do XYZ because, whatever. And he says something totally crass. I will just say, Annabelle, for instance, daddy had a hard day. Let's forgive him. Let's practice forgiveness. And then later he apologizes and, the guilt comes on him. Anyways, but basically in a nutshell, I now believe that, God is bigger than me. He is bigger than my husband. And I have to constantly remind myself of that when I want to correct him 24/7. Cause I do, I'm a wife, I'm a woman. So when I think that, my husband is wrong, leading us down a wrong path, for instance, leading himself down a wrong path, I have to trust in God. I can't trust in myself to correct him because it's not going to be enough. I can't trust in him to fix himself because he's a human, and he makes mistakes. I now believe that God is going to work in him as I put my trust in him, as I pray, and as I love him more. So let's go back to that first verse that I read in 1 Peter 3. Basically, women submit to your husband so that they may be won without a word by the behavior of their wives. This is happening in my life, okay? As they observe your chaste and respectful behavior, which is nothing like who I was and am. Like, I'm still battling it, okay? And so for years, my husband had no interest, and this isn't anything that he wouldn't want me to talk about. He literally doesn't care. He's not very private about this. So, and he talked about it in the last episode. So no dirty laundry being aired here. But for years, he had no desire in learning about God's word and what was in it, the Christian way. I would take him from church to church. But also the biggest thing wasn't like me taking him to churches. It wasn't me reading him from the Bible to him. He wasn't being won without a word from me because I didn't have respectful behavior towards him and making him the leader of our household, which is again, really like against what the world says. It says that the man is not supposed to lead and the women gets the ultimate say. Honestly, that's what the world says. And it's only lately that I have been submitting to my husband probably within the last like 4 to 6 months, that for the first time in our marriage, he is actively seeking the word of God. It makes me so emotional because if you're listening, it's going to sound so strange, but if you're watching, you get it. You can imagine that, when you don't have God in your life, it's very difficult. And like we were joking about in the last podcast episode, when you're unequally yoked, it can be very difficult to get through to one another. And especially because once you have kids and like once you believe your kids should learn certain things, honestly, my husband doesn't care. He wants them to learn now, but he didn't for a long time. It can be disaligning, okay? When you don't have someone's full support, like support as in they're leading alongside you. And so I truly believe it's because, I got to get it together. Okay. All right. I got it together briefly for a second, but I truly believe it's because I have submitted to my husband that has put things into perspective for him, that has put him back in the leadership role of our household. And that has totally transformed our marriage, like I said. And so anyways, let's go back to my notes before I get like super like crazy here. I want my children to know that their dad is in charge. I want them to have a masculine leader of a dad, not someone that is constantly trying to prove his point to his wife and, is constantly battling a quarreling and contentious wife. I don't want that. It also, another big reason, this is huge, okay, it empowers my husband to be the leader, like I've been saying, and not to be passive like so many men out there. Now, I see this all the time. Women, and this was me too, women will just say, this is how it is and this is what we're doing, this weekend. They won't even ask their husband, like, what do you want to do? Do you want to work on your car? Let me give you time for that. That's an example because my husband likes cars. But, how can I help you fulfill your dreams? Which we'll talk about that in a minute too. But they don't ask a single thing about their husband's desires. They're like swept under the rug. This is like, I swear, most marriages and most men that I see, that I come across, this is just how it is. The women lead the household, they lead the finances, they lead all the decisions, and the men, they get depressed, a lot of them. So I also wanted to talk about 5 of the biggest ways that I wasn't submitting before I start like getting hysterical. I'm just kidding. I got it together. I only get emotional when I know that God's word and here we go again. And his teaching has changed my life in such a powerful way. Like that's the only time I'm triggered with like a flood of emotions because there's nothing better. There's literally nothing better, but okay, I can barely talk about it. As you can tell, I'm super thankful and blessed that I started going down this path, which is why I'm trying to do a second podcast talking about this stuff. So, okay, reel it in, Haley. 5 ways I wasn't submitting so you guys can maybe learn something from my mistakes. Okay, number 1, putting the kids' needs before his needs. This is like women 101, okay? Because this happens all the time. Like for instance, this still happens all the time. I have to fight myself against it. And this is the hardest thing for me is to put my husband before my kids. I think a lot of women will say that this is easy, but let me give you a good example of how like you might not be doing this. This is my biggest issue, okay? So let's say I have 3 kids. I'm about to have 4. They're loud. They're 3 kids. So there's a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a newly 2-year-old. And they're all squawking all the time. Okay. They are so loud. The whole house is so loud. And sometimes my husband, Doug, wants to tell me something, usually about the business or something serious about his plans for something. And he wants my full attention. But my kids will be, again, climbing me like a tree. Mommy, can I do this? Can I do this? Or can you help me with this? Can you get me a string cheese? Can you do this? Usually 9 times out of 10, I'll be like, hold on, I can't talk to you right now. Like, do you see that they're all trying to get me? And I would say that. Disrespectful, okay? This is what I was doing for so many years. This happened with everything. And it always becoming a mom for me was such a journey because I wasn't around little kids and I didn't have like an example of like, be quiet, I need to talk to daddy. Not because of my parents were bad or anything, just because I was like an only child. So I never saw that. My sister's 10 years older. I'm not literally an only child. So anyways, I could talk to whoever I wanted. My parents didn't have to tell me to like, hold on. I mean, they did sometimes, but I never saw that growing up and I didn't get an example of that. And I also didn't read the Bible about this practice. So Anyways, now what I will do is say, hey, God, I mean, not all the time. It's still so hard for me because in the moment it's stressful. Like there's a lot of chaos going on. But now I'll say, hey guys, I need to talk to daddy for 5 minutes. Please leave us alone for just a couple minutes. I want to give him my full attention because I care about what he's saying. And I'll come back to you to get you the string cheese, or I might just get it, or I'll come back to you to help you put on your roller skates. And I've had to train the kids to let me respect my husband because they were so used to having me do whatever they wanted in the exact moment that they wanted it, because I would drop everything to make the loudness stop. My family wasn't loud in that way with a bunch of, squabbling kids all the time. And so loud noises, like, wow, they really get to me and my parents. I'm like the first person to mute the commercials on the TV. I like want peace and quiet all the time. And that's just not how it is when you have a big family. And so I'm learning that. So I have to try and tune them out, not in like a rude way, but in as gentle of a way as I can. And so for a couple months there, they were not used to that. Okay. They were not used to me listening to him and ignoring them. And so they would get louder and louder, as kids naturally do, because they were trained, if the louder they get, the more they can, get me to do things faster for them. And so now I'd have to tell them twice. And this is what we did for a couple months. It's just child training, 101. But hey, if you can't be quiet and let me talk to daddy, we have to close the door, lock the room. And this sounds like we're terrible parents. We're not closing them in anywhere, and they would learn quickly after the first couple times that when he had to tell me something, he gets my full attention first. And it sounds a lot harsher than it is. It's not. They end up getting the string cheese, and these kids are spoiled rotten. So anyways, but that's the first thing that I was doing. And when this started to happen, when I started putting the kids first, was right when I had my firstborn, because she was a rough baby just by nature. She's a spirited kid. Okay. So she couldn't breastfeed. Like the breastfeeding was all over the place. I had to do like formula, but I did like the SNS feeding tube. Not because she was a preemie, just because I wanted to pump and give her milk and breastfeed at the same time. It's very strange, but I was a neurotic mom who had to breastfeed or I was going to die. And so because of that, she required 110% energy. And so when my husband would need something, no, I am feeding the baby. She's going to starve if I don't give her milk. The whole classic like crazy breastfeeding mom. I was that 100 times over. And so he was always thrown by the wayside, or whatever that's called. He was set aside so I could focus on this baby for the first year. And I didn't end there. Okay. Well, then the 2-year-old thing started to happen. Tantrums, screaming, I can't listen to you. Like, I have to tend to this baby. Like, can't you see she's having a tantrum? I don't have time for you. Basically, I wouldn't say that, but I'd be like, seriously, like, be quiet. That's horrible. Like, it is. It's so horrible. And he got used to it. And men totally get used to it because they're nice and they're forgiving. Not they. He is nice and he is forgiving. Lots of husbands. They understand that it is a stressful moment. They see that the kids are screaming. Why should they be put first? Especially if your husband doesn't come from a biblical background. He can't step in and be like, listen, this is wrong. What's happening? You can't let the child control you. Doug just wanted things to get better and go away. The screaming, really. So he'd be like, okay, I'll talk to you later. And so it's different if your husband's obviously raised with those biblical values. Nowadays, Doug is learning all these things and he snips in the bud. He's like, and you're not allowed to do that. You can't, disrespect mom like that. You're not going to disrespect me like that. And so he's totally transforming himself by just reading with me and the kids the Bible at night and going to church and us learning these things together. So it's been amazing. But anyways, that's the first thing. The second thing is this is huge, not putting his desires above mine and the kids. So I didn't realize, like people say, marriage is a sacrifice, love is a sacrifice, but like literally you sacrifice everything, what you're supposed to do, to put your husband's desires. I was going to put needs, but then it would kind of go into like the sexual intimacy thing, which I don't really want to touch on because that's so triggering. But like desires. So like, for example, we're always starting and running businesses. If you guys follow me, we try so many things. We make money 100% online now. But that was a rough road, to finally be independent from a boss, whatever. And so we've had huge ups, huge downs, plateaus, like mentally stressful moments running a business with your spouse, as you could imagine. And so because of that, everything was focused on the business. Nothing was focused on his desires. I didn't have, I wasn't placing my faith in God. I was placing my faith in money and the business and in my husband. And so all those things are, they're fleeting and they can change all the time. So for instance, my husband always had this desire to, well, he's a big hobbyist. People say that women love people, or, females love people and men love things. And I feel like that's not, like, there's no truer phrase. My husband wants to build keyboards. He wants to build computers. He wants to race cars. He wants to build cars. I mean, his hobbies are endless. They're not endless. There's only a couple things, but he's obsessed with all of them, and he goes deeper and deeper and deeper. So he's always had the desire to work on cars. Like, that's the way he decompresses, de-stresses through our crazy life that can be very stressful. But I would always say there's not enough time for that right now. Okay. And so that was like one of my big, like, I didn't have faith that things are going to work out. It was, I was always coming from a mental, which we talked about this in like the business related podcast I did a couple of weeks ago. But I was the person that had the scarcity mindset. So I would say, what are you doing working on your car? And like, we don't have time for that. We don't have the money to leisurely work on your it because time is money when you're a business owner. And so for years, he left his he has like a Nissan 240 SX, which is like a drift car. It was broken. Like, it just wouldn't run. He wanted to fix it. It was only going to take a couple hours. And I would be like, no, because you guys have to understand that when you feel like you're going to run out of money, it's a scary thing. You don't want your spouse to waste time and money doing something leisurely. But I should have had faith in God. I should have submitted to my husband. If he wanted to work on his car for an hour, just let him work his car for an hour. It's not like we live in SoCal. There's nothing for me to necessarily be scared of. I'm not living in, the slums somewhere and gonna like lose my house. Like, it was never a dire situation in that way. So I should have just let him. And in fact, I shouldn't have just let him. I should have encouraged him. And so basically, number 2, not putting his desires above my own. My desire was to work more and more and more, have him work more. My desire was to make sure that the house wasn't an absolute wreck. So I would say, we got to clean the house first. Like, you can't, like sit and take your car out and pull everything out. Like, this house is an absolute disaster. I need help with that, and this and this and this, and then this is due, and so that's like a huge regret, because I should have just loved him more, and submission in my eyes now and biblically is just loving your spouse more. So the fourth one is creating a life where biblical roles were out of whack. And so this really is specific to financial roles for our family. So I'm not going to go too deep into this because I talked about this in last week's episode, marriage mistakes, not having, our biggest one was not having a vision for our family. We talked about together. That was our number one mistake. And then the week before I talked about, I touched lightly at the very end of the business related podcast, how we're able to hit 7 figures as a couple, and in business. And then at the end, I talked about why I shouldn't have taken over like everything as far as, running the business. And so that is like number 4, because I know that there's a lot of women out there that believe they have to be the breadwinner because their husband makes less money. My opinion now is that I will do whatever it takes to, which is what we're doing this year. That's the biggest goal for this year. I'll let you guys know how it goes. I mean, I believe it'll happen, but we're working really hard towards my husband becoming the sole provider for our family. And anything I do is during nap time, just for fun. Like, the things that I do for fun are income producing, because that's my passion, is to be an entrepreneur. So I'm not saying you don't need to be an entrepreneur, but being this girl boss, mom boss that, runs businesses, I don't know. It's not right for me. I'm not going to say it's not right. I don't think I'm the ultimate decision maker for that. I just don't think it's right for our family. It's hard for me personally to be the helpmeet that I need to be to my husband, to homeschool and rear children that fear the Lord, and also run a full-time business. Like, the business, it at one time became an idol for me, like it can and does for so many people that have successful businesses. I think it's like inevitable. At one point, it'll become an idol, because to be successful, you have to be obsessed. And God says, don't be obsessed with anything but him. Okay. So yeah, that's how it was for so many years. And so I battle with that. My husband doesn't. He can turn it off, and he can do his hobbies, and he can focus on his family and be the leader in that way and be more level-headed. I'm a dreamer. I'm a doer. And so that's like a battle for me. And so I just want to take myself out of that temptation and that sin. Okay. So yeah, the fourth one is becoming the ultimate decision maker through everything. So through the business, through, child rearing and all that kind of stuff. So the fifth one, though, is not stepping into a helpmeet role for the household. So again, a lot of the feminists out there will say that their husband should pull their weight. You know, the wife works all day long. And I get this one lady, I don't know if she's listening maybe, but I get a podcast listener and she sends me reels that like combat like what I'm saying in these podcasts. It's not going to change my mind because I see reels, specifically Instagram reels all the time that are saying women work way harder than men. I did a podcast on like, you know, the things I don't believe, whatever. And that was one of them. I think they work equally as hard. And I think that if you come from a biblical perspective, it's only going to serve you. If you complain and nitpick about how your husband didn't take out the trash and if you basically just complain to your husband all the time and don't lift him up, it's not going to serve anybody. There's a way to respect your spouse and, you know, like I said, respectfully ask him to help in a different way or in a better way. But again, if he keeps not doing it, just like let it go because you're not the God of your husband. That's just what I believe. Okay. So anyways, as far as the household, since we do everything together, it is in my feminine nature to want a clean house. It's not, I mean, some men are clean. My husband is like, he could live in, you know, I don't know. He's like a dude's dude. He could sit around in borderline filth, in my opinion. I have higher standards, obviously, not literal filth, but than, you know, I ever would. And so he doesn't mind if the laundry piles up. He doesn't mind if the dishes, like he'll clean the kitchen. He'll say, I clean the kitchen. I'm like, the whole kitchen sink's filled. Like, he's like, oh, those are soaking. That's like a classic man. Some women do that, but you know what I mean? Like that's a classic dude thing to say. They're just soaking. I'll get to them later. I'm like, you know, you won't, I'll have to do it. You know? So for a long time, I would always be combative. We can't do this because the house is dirty. We can't do this because I have to clean more, when I should have honestly really become a minimalist, because then nothing, like, I don't know, 80% of your issues would be gone because you wouldn't have a lot of stuff. But also I should have put the role of help me on myself, even though I was running the business. I should have been trying to get out of that, you know, even though I had all this stuff on my plate that I could have complained about. Well, I have to do this, and I also have to do this, and I have to do this. The most important thing is obviously a relationship with God. Second, that I believe now, is a relationship with your spouse. So if being a contentious and annoying wife is not going to better the relationship with your spouse, and if you placing unnecessary expectations on him, if it's not going to better your marriage, then stop doing it, you know? So I've sort of like stopped asking him. I mean, I still ask him to help. Like I'll say, hey, could you help me clean this room? Like I still ask to help. I'm not a slave. I'm not abused, nothing like that, obviously. And he helps every single time, and he always has. But I take the role of a homemaker more seriously now because I feel like it's my God-given role. How have I turned it around? So obviously I've talked about a lot of different things examples I was doing and other things, but literally how I've turned it around now is I would say like 90% of the week, whatever that is, 6 out of 7 days of the week, I wake up and the first thing that I do is I read God's word. Okay. So I'm doing like, a devotional from, I think his name's something Blackaby. So good. Experiencing God. You look that up. Experiencing God, Blackaby on Amazon. I love that one. And so I do the devotional, and then I read like a Proverbs of the day. And then I write down these answers to these questions every single day, nearly every single day. And I've never done this before. And remember, my marriage has never been better. So the first question I answer is, what would make Doug fulfilled today? Okay. And so this gets more tricky because we work together. If your husband just went to work, it might be easier for you in this way. I'm not saying it's easier for you literally, because I get a lot more help. But maybe it's just like cook his favorite like teriyaki meal for dinner, you know, and do something that's been stressing him out for him. Like change the car's oil. I don't know, go get it done if he would be okay with that, or do it yourself. I don't know. It sounds hard, but something like that. Like what would make him feel fulfilled? Giving him time to work on his car. Maybe being like, hey, you want to play a video game? Like, do you want to play one with me after the kids go to sleep? It's not something we do anymore, but I know a lot of dudes are into that, you know, and being like showing your support for something that used to nag him about, like do that for your marriage. That's the first thing. What would make Doug fulfilled today? And I write it down, like the top 3 things. Second thing is sort of the first, but what can I do extra for him to make him feel special? Usually it's me not looking like a bridge troll. Now he says he doesn't notice, but I do. Okay. If I look like a smelly, yucky, unkempt wife, it's like, it's not going to be cute if I nag him. And you shouldn't do it anyways, but really, so getting ready for the day, cleaning the house for the day, like again, letting him say, hey, I'll take the kids to Trader Joe's while you work on your car. He'll be so happy, And then the third question is, how can I get the kids involved? So this is so like crucial, because you want their support of their dad. You are creating the vision for a happy marriage, and happy marriages, they give to each other. Even when one person is struggling, you still give, you give, you give, you give, and you put other people before yourself. And so I want them to do that for their dad. And you have to really ask yourself, literally, if I could do something for him today that would make him feel fulfilled, happy, etc. What is that? You can't just say, I'll clean the house for him. That might be something he doesn't really care about. You have to ask yourself, seriously. So for me, it's stuff that I freaking don't want to do, okay? It's stuff that's emotionally draining, mentally draining, stuff specifically, I'm not going to go into it, but for our business that I know stresses him out. And that if it went away and I did it during nap time and I told the kids, I cannot play right now, I have to do this for daddy. Will you help me support daddy by being quiet, listening to your audiobook, whatever. I've done that all of the last month, and he's so much happier for it. And it's stuff that he dreads, or stuff that he's really he's really stressed out about. So usually for me, it's working on the business, but for you, it might be cleaning out his garage. Maybe not, men are picky about that, but things that really you don't want to do. It's not the easy stuff. It's the stuff that really makes a huge impact. The other thing that I do practically is I ask him what he would have me do, and I do it. So for a long time, I would say, so do you think I should do this or this? He'd say, I don't care. It's passive attitude, and he said that in the last podcast. It's not a secret. He's just a chill dude. He just wants me to be happy, And so a lot of men are I don't care. But they say that because they know you're going to do what you want anyways, And so their opinion kind of just doesn't matter in the relationship. And so I told him, if you say I don't care, then I'm just going to not do it. And so after a while, he took the hint. Okay, she's literally not doing the things because I won't make a decision. And so nicely, it wasn't passive aggressive. We were under, communication about it. So now he gives me his decision point blank. Well, you should do this. And so he's become, I put him in more of the leadership role of our household through anything should they do tennis or ice skating? Should we do this in the business or this? And so he'll just tell me straight up what he's thinking, and, we're all happier for it. But that is pretty much it for everything I think I could fit into this submission related podcast. Again, I know a lot of you guys are just gonna I don't even know. I don't know what you guys are gonna think, because I think, like I said, the world is twisted the word of submission so much that people think you just undergo abuse, which is not the case. I believe in the Bible, and I believe in good. And I think that it's an act of love to submit to your spouse and put him in the role that God has intended for him to be. I do not believe women are supposed to be leaders of the household and of the finances even. I think that you could do that, but it's going to be rough. I don't know. That's just my opinion, just from my extreme experience in doing the opposite. So let me know what you guys think. And again, leave a review if you get any value from this. And I'll see you in my next one. Bye, guys.